You have powers that you have not yet dreamed of or demonstrated. But you can, and you will. You must. So let's begin right now. In his book, The 12 Powers of Man, Charles Fillmore wrote, "The subconscious realm in man has 12 great centers of action with 12 presiding egos or identities. When Jesus had attained a certain soul development, he called his 12 apostles to him. This means that when man is developing out of a mere personal consciousness into spiritual consciousness, he begins to train deeper and larger powers. He sends his thought down into the inner centers of his organism, and through his word quickens them to life. Where before his powers have worked in the personal, now they begin to expand and work in the universal. This is the first and the second coming of Christ, spoken of in the Scriptures. The first coming is the receiving of truth into the conscious mind, but we see it as an external thing. The second coming is the awakening and the regeneration of the subconscious mind through the superconscious or Christ mind. The second coming of the Christ is personal in that you become it. It becomes an experience. Last week we began a study of the 12 mystical powers of the mind, recognizing that if these powers should only be partially developed in us, we would have at that moment superhuman abilities to understand, to achieve, to develop, and to take charge of our destiny. Your destiny would change because a new person automatically has a new destiny. You and I, within ourselves, already are whole persons. But that whole person must be acknowledged and developed and experienced. And that whole person is the fourth dimensional person that the Scriptures talk about and that Jesus Christ was the example of. And you are a fully functioning, already functioning, spiritual entity. But we must explore and develop this inner potential. Now, you and I, in these classes, are beginning the exciting experiment and experience of awakening these powers, one by one, in our own minds, calling them forth into spiritual directed activity, just as Jesus did. Last week, as you know, we started with the first power that was represented by Simon Peter, the first disciple, who was called into action. Now, Charles Fillmore was the first teacher to draw a correspondence between the 12 apostles or disciples of Christ and the 12 powers of the human mind. And he also designated a certain area of man's physical body as the ruling center of each faculty or power of the mind. And this is important as we begin to work with these powers and to begin to discipline these mental activities that are within us. Now, some of these powers are so closely connected in their action and reaction that they are represented by disciples who are brothers, indicating a kinship or correlation in action and polarity. For example, Simon Peter, the first disciple, and the second one, Andrew, who represents strength, were brothers. And this is an indication of polarity. Now, to the human mind, polarity implies duality, or the pairs of opposites, such as male and female, birth and death, black and white. But polarity really means that all creative action is the result of the coming together in harmony, or the coactivity, the copulation, if you will, of these masculine and feminine counterparts. You see, there's not a duality. There's only a duality because these pairs of opposites have not yet come together so that they begin to complement each other. It's the complementary action of the pairs of opposites that is the beginning of the creative process and the beginning of the change of your identity and of your changed experience. And let's have a brief lesson in polarity because it's very important to you and to me if we wish to have a dramatic change in our own lives. Your mind has only two types of action or movement possible to it. And one of these actions or activities is what we call thinking, intellectual, objective perception. It's in the head. The other mind action is what we call feeling. It's subjective, feminine. It's in the body. You would find it feeling more here in the solar plexus region of your body and radiating out from that solar plexus region. You see, you are created in the image, after the likeness, of our parent mind, or God. Mind is a synonym for God. We do not think of God as a person in the sky somewhere, a male person, I might say, in the sky. You never thought of God as a female out there, did you? No, God was that masculine figure. Well, God is not. We refer to God as Father, Mother God, the masculine, feminine nature of thought and feeling, a thinking, feeling God. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Now, what is being said here is that male and female, not just men and women, but God is this duality, this polarity, this complementary activity of mind. And you can see this universal principle manifested clearly in the fact that while each one of us is both masculine and feminine in nature, and any scientist will tell you that we have all of the characteristics of both sexes, both in our physical organism and in our mentality. But still, each one of us is expressing at this moment as the dominant sex role. Now, each of these mind powers is created in like manner. Each mind power contains both poles and is a creative polarity in itself. But also, each mind power is expressing as a dominant sex. So, and this will probably startle some of you, 6 of your mind powers are masculine or thinking powers. And 6 of your mind powers are feminine or feeling powers. The thinking powers are contacted, awakened, and trained through conscious thought. And the feeling powers are contacted and disciplined through consciously feeling them into action, into movement. And I use the word discipline, the idea that you must discipline your mind. You see, discipline comes from a Latin word meaning pupil and to learn. And disciple comes from the same word. Our mind powers must be acknowledged, accepted, disciplined, and trained. If you will go back and remember the stories that you have either heard or read about how Jesus had to work with the 12 disciples in the Bible stories, you will see that he was constantly working with undisciplined behavior. As a matter of fact, he called forth into activity 12 very unsophisticated persons. And for a reason. You see, this was his method of showing us what we must do with our own disciple mind powers. And if you don't believe that the activities of your mind are undisciplined, begin to observe yourself just for a brief period of time. This first came to my attention about 25 years ago. I was 29 years old before I knew I had a mind. Well, I knew it was there, but I didn't really know it. I never had really seen with my mind the activity of my mind. And one day, when this idea of change first came upon me, I was driving along in my automobile. Correction. It was someone else's automobile because I didn't have one yet. I had not demonstrated success well enough to be able to say that I had one. And that was concerning me, along with many other things. I thought to myself, I will control my thought for maybe 5 minutes. And I realized that I couldn't control my thought for 5 seconds. And so as I drove along, I put my index finger out in front of me so that I could see it and at the same time not run off the road. And I realized, and I was going to watch my finger and keep my attention on my finger. I'm going to think that I am watching my finger. And you know that I couldn't do it for 5 seconds? I was driving at about 60 miles an hour, and you know how those yellow lines move by you so quickly? It seemed to me that I could not control my thought for the period of time necessary for a yellow line, a strip in the road, to pass under me at 60 miles an hour. That shows you how undisciplined my mental activity was, and my emotions completely out of control. My mind was in charge of me. It was telling me what to think and how to feel. And I knew that something had to be done about that. And so the process began and still continues. This past week, we've been working with the mind power called faith, as represented by the subject of our lesson last week, that disciple Simon Peter. Let me remind you that faith is your power to say yes to your good. And faith will actually create the good that you seek. It will bring that good forth out of the invisible world, and it will kind of jerk it forth into visibility if you really are connected with faith. Now, let me ask you a question. Has your faith wavered this past week? Be honest. You can't fudge. Did your faith tend to forget what he learned in class last week about the presence of God and his creative activity in you? Did your faith always remember the immediate availability of God's love and power and call it forth into each situation that you entered into? Did you go into it with great accelerated faith, and so that the activity of your mind just dramatically changed everything that was taking place around you? Did it? Or perhaps, like Peter, when confronted by a difficulty, did your mind fall back on its old system of anger and lashing out, or of trying to handle your life situations in the old way by yourself, using your own wiles and devices? This past week, has your faith faculty really been consistent? Or would you say that at this stage of our development, we're going through what is referred to as not having the strength of one's convictions? Not having the strength of your convictions. Have you had the experience of having convictions or ideas, and I mean deep conviction and excellent inspired ideas, but somehow not having the strength or the capacity to see them through? They tend to waver and get lost, and you forget them. And has that ever occurred to you? Have you had the experience of your dreams and hopes somehow leading nowhere really, and even your prayers didn't seem to help? Or the experience of making brave, bold promises and commitments, making them fearlessly and repeating them often, only to have them become the seed ideas that are spoken of in the Bible, that are cast on hard ground and don't spring up and grow. Has that ever occurred to you? Well, if it has, you're in good company. It's all right. Because this always happens in the initial stage of faith awakening. Remember that we're not dealing with human mentality here. We're dealing with superhuman powers, spiritual powers that can and will literally produce miracles in your experience to your own satisfaction. You can prove the reality of the existence of these powers to yourself in your own life. That's the only place you can prove it. Always when the faith power is first awakened, it has a tendency to vacillate. But then there's a perfect solution to that, because immediately the next disciple power that you call forth is Andrew, Peter's brother, who represents spiritual strength. Now, most people think of strength in terms of force or exertion or physical pressure or muscle power. But this is not correct. These things are perhaps methods of using up strength, but they are not strength themselves. So what actually is strength? The Bible gives us a very perceptive reference to what strength is in Isaiah. For thus saith the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, the whole one. In returning and rest shall you be saved. In quietness and confidence shall be your strength. Do you see what Isaiah is telling the reader about strength? Strength is not movement. Strength is not making noise. Strength is not physical pressure or exertion. Strength is not really going out there and getting with it. That's not strength. That is the utilization of strength, but it is not strength. Strength is quietness, confidence. You see, strength is a word that describes not the movements of a thing, but the quality of a thing, the essence of it, the nature of it. And your strength is not the movement that you perform, nor the pressure that you exert physically or psychologically upon life. Your strength is actually your quality of durability, of dependability, of balance, and of stability. It is the certainness of you. Have you known someone in your life who was the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow? And you know that the next event that occurs in their life, it could even be a major catastrophe, and that person would stand tall and straight and virtually unmoved. That for a moment, for a very brief moment, they might wilt a bit, but you would see them in that fraction of a second stand up tall and straight and strong. Have you seen such a person? I have. Your strength is a quality of your being. Now, there are many people with much physical power, athletic, powerful build, and the ability to perform all sorts of impressive movements, and gosh, how we love to see that. But this has very little to do with the kind of strength that we're talking about. You see, there's some very small, diminutive, physically frail people who are loaded with this spiritual strength of being that I'm talking to you about. I've seen some tiny little people who were loaded with strength. Now, of course, it's possible to have both. The only spiritually valid standard for strength pertains to your durability, your stability, and dependability. A person's true strength lies in the balance achieved in his thinking and feeling, or the coming together of the male and female nature, the mystical marriage that even now is taking place in your mind. And strength is established only when the two become as one, a unity. Peter and Andrew joined Jesus simultaneously. Do you remember that? Without even invitation, they saw this whole person, this fully developed person, the Christ. They said, there he is, and they moved together, these co-faculties, to become one with the Christ. As a unit, simultaneously, Peter and Andrew, faith and strength. Faith, the intellectual thought process, and strength, the emotional counterpart of that strength that keeps on keeping on. It can take an idea into itself and believe it forever. It never quits believing the truth. When thought and feeling are not in harmony, however, when they work against each other on any project, then strength is depleted and weakness is felt and nothing is accomplished and failure results. Today, at this very point in my notes, when I was making the notes this morning for this class, my telephone rang, and it was a dear person who has attended here for a long time, except not recently. She's not been here. She's been in the hospital. And several of us have been working with her in our thoughts and our prayers, and she had just come home from the hospital. And she was calling to ask for help, not with her physical condition, but with her addiction, she said, with her heavy smoking. She said, it's the most amazing thing. I made up my mind to stop smoking, and I was listening to one of your tapes while I made up my mind to stop smoking, and even while I made up my mind to stop smoking, I walked across the room to light a cigarette. Now, you understand that kind of faith, don't you? Well, I asked her if she had made a firm decision to quit. And she said, yes, she had made the decision. And I said, well, do you believe that you're going to quit? And she said, no. You see how firm our decisions are, how much faith we have? And so I asked her another question. I said, when you made a decision, an intellectual decision, a faith decision, to quit smoking, what did your feelings think about the idea? And she said, They didn't like it at all. She said, my feelings haven't quit. They want nothing to do with me stopping smoking. We can't quit doing anything until our feeling nature agrees with it. And that's why that most people never stop smoking. Who try to stop, they make an intellectual decision, but their emotional nature doesn't even hear about it. And when it does, it wants nothing to do with it. So she and I talked, Mary and I talked for a few more moments, and she did make a decision, and then we began to work with the feelings so that they came up and started agreeing. Now, they weren't really agreeing yet. We didn't have that much time. Now, this idea is beautifully symbolized in the Bible story of Samson and Delilah, two of my favorite characters. And if you haven't tuned into them lately, I suggest that you open the book to Judges. It sounds like one of the soap operas that is on television today. Samson in the Hebrew means sunlight, sunny, warm, distinguished. Having to do with your solar plexus or sun region. And your solar plexus is your feeling nature, isn't it? So Samson, while masculine, was not really masculine, was really feminine. And the life of Samson represents growth phases in human consciousness. Samson is just like you and me, the character Samson. And if you read the story, you'll see how his thought process developed. First of all, he was quite taken with his physical identity. He was caught up in the physical awareness of himself. He saw himself as being only a physical person, and very proud of it, very accomplished with his feats. And then in time, he proved what you have already proven, and that's why you're here, that human consciousness and human effort alone always fail in the end, don't they? Especially ours. Samson was living proof of that. But in the end, he turned to a different kind of strength. You see, he did not have the power to perform the last act, the physical power. And that last act was to push apart the pillars of the temple so the temple would fall upon the enemy. And he had to call on a different kind of strength. His physical strength was not there. He called upon spiritual strength. Delilah is really one of my favorite characters. And her name in the Hebrew means poured out, exhausted, weak, pining with pleasure, lustful pining, languishing, longing. But Delilah, who has been depicted as being a rather lascivious sexual being, really represents negative emotion. Negative emotions. You see, Delilah was actually Samson's enemy. She deceived him and worked against him constantly, and all the while professing to be his lover and his friend. Well, Delilah in you has done the very same thing, probably this day. You see, our negative emotions are always deceiving us. They're always pretending that they're our friends. Oh, they love us so much. Now, Delilah eventually robbed Samson of his strength and destroyed him. Can you see, do you have some concept of what Delilah is for you and me? Can you see this activity of mind working in your life? These undependable, destructive emotions and feelings? No matter how strong you are in positive thinking, you can be so determined with your intellect. And you can be working to control your thought. But Delilah, in the form of negative, destructive emotions, will bring you down and will rob you of your strength, of your energy, and of your ability to perform. And notice that Delilah destroyed Samson as he slept with his head on her knees. This means that he was asleep to his inner negative emotional states. He did not even know what was going on. As bright as he thought himself to be, he could not see what was happening inside himself. And so he actually laid his head right over there on her knees. He just made it so very easy for Delilah to do him in. And you and I do the same thing consistently. We make it so easy for this experience to happen to us. Now, she fixed him by shaving his head. You'll need to understand that in the Bible, hair stands for vitality. And she shaved his head and therefore robbed him of his vitality. And she could do this because he would not look at it and admit what really was going on inside himself. He would not see how destructive these negative emotional responses to life really were. You see, he loved Delilah, didn't he? And he defended her actually while she was destroying him. And this means that he loved his negative emotions and defended his right to have them, and he called them natural. Do you love your negativity? Do you like Delilah pretty good? Does it feel good to feel bad? Do you entertain Delilah often? And are you asleep at what's happening inside your own mind? An example would be, do you defend your worrying? You've done it all your life, you know, and doesn't everyone worry? You'll hear Delilah say. Isn't it a part of our responsibility as parents? Why, you must worry about your children, surely. No, you're not supposed to. What about as a citizen of the United States? Aren't you worried about the energy crunch that's coming? Aren't you worried about that situation? As an employer, aren't you worried about conditions with the company? Or as an employee, aren't you worried about conditions with the company? It doesn't make any difference which end of it you're on. Negative emotions will punch your button. And we have this great reinforcement because psychologists, psychiatrists, and religionists say that it's natural to worry, that it's part of the human scene, and that the solution to worry and fear and anger and these negative things is to ventilate them. Have you been told to ventilate them? All this does is make you better at it. It makes you better at your own destruction. Now, I say to you that we're more than human, and if we wish to have strength, we must awaken and turn against these negatives and begin to see that it is not necessary to be that way. I'm not talking about pressing them down. I'm talking about reaching the point of self-determination wherein that you no longer have to have these negative experiences, these undependable emotions that actually kill us. It's possible to divorce yourself from them, to separate yourself from them. But not if you defend your anger or hold on to your grudges or take pride in not forgiving an offense. Let me ask you this. Do you listen to gossip regularly? Or to those meaningless, depressing conversations that certain people regularly insist on having with you? You know, it's time for the telephone to ring, or you know how it is at the office. If you do, watch your strength level go down each time. In your strongest hour, you can just really be sailing and get into one of those conversations for about 5 minutes and watch what happens. Go out into your day really turned on, and you know that you're going to make your demonstration, whether it be making that sale or whatever it happens to be. Cleaning out the garage, spring cleaning coming up. And you're moving with power, with strength, with inspiration, with joy. Get into a negative conversation or a response and watch what happens to your strength. Lose your temper for a fraction of a second, and whoever lost it for a fraction of a second, because that's only the beginning of it. And watch your energy level, your strength level. It will be dissipated, and the capacity that you have to function effectively will immediately disappear. You become the victim of the condition. A Samson with his head on Delilah's knees. She didn't even have to reach to shave him. He just said, "Here am I. Do it to me." Notice how little you achieve the day that begins on that negative note. Do you take someone else's problems unto yourself? A parent? A child? Or do you take some cause that on the surface appears to be good for family, for country? We've got a good one going now, again, the energy crisis. And have you already started thinking about what's going to happen in about 6 weeks when we begin to have blackouts Have you gotten into that crunch inside yourself? Don't do it. We'll actually enjoy it. We will. If there's any cause that keeps you emotionally run out, see it and begin to separate yourself from it. If you really want to know why your own life never seems to get put together, see what's happening inside your mind. And let Samson wake up and see what Delilah has been doing to him for a long time. Now, the physical location of the power of strength is located near the adrenal glands between the hip bones and the ribs at the small of the back. And when someone is tired or worn out, depleted in strength and energy, you've heard them say, what? Oh, my poor aching back. But strength, however, is not muscle power. It's not man power. Strength is mind power. Strength is God power or spirit power. As a matter of fact, it's universal power that is available to you. Strength is the power to accomplish all that you have to do anytime that you need to do it. Now, negative emotions of fear and anger, and this is what instinctive man needed to use to cause the release of adrenaline into the bloodstream. You see, primitive man was not spiritual, could not know of the higher system of thought and of the powers that were available. And so primitive man needed something to help him to flee or to fight, didn't he? And so it was his negative emotions. Fear prepared him for flight, and adrenaline would flow, and he could run about twice as fast as he could a minute ago. And anger prepared him for a fight, didn't it? And adrenaline would flow, and he had the strength to do it. But you see, the use of adrenaline is not strength. It is the utilization of strength. And if you go into any activity from fear or anger, you're moving into it from weakness and from negativity, and you are, by the very nature of that, depleting your strength. And if you don't believe it, watch yourself in about 5 minutes and watch yourself shake. And you'll hardly be able to walk across the street. You will have lost your strength. Strength is spiritual in nature. Now, Andrew's spiritual location is within the mind in the place that we call the silence. Andrew, our strength's nature is feeling rather than thinking, as I mentioned to you earlier. And Andrew was the disciple who was known as the strong, silent one. Andrew never said anything. You don't know what Andrew ever said because he didn't say anything. Now, some of you girls have referred to a certain person as the strong, silent type, haven't you? Haven't you? Okay, the scripture that probably most directly connects us to Andrew or to strength is, "Be still and know that I am God." The power of strength is the result of the stilling of the mind and of any outer activity. Let's begin again this experiment and experience of directing our own mind state. Become relaxed again. We're going to call these first two powers forth into spiritually directed activity, and we're going to call them together just as they came together to join Jesus, who represents the Christ or the whole person. And you, to me, represent the Christ or the whole person. You are neither Simon Peter nor are you Andrew. These are powers that you have. But you're the whole person, developing into that fullness of your spiritual identity. Now let's make this a dramatic demonstration and a specific demonstration that will prove to you for all time that you truly are a spiritual being who has been given powers that can change your destiny. And the way we're going to do this is for you to take a problem that concerns you. Bring it into the screen of your mind, your awareness at this moment. The most important matter of this time of your life. The situation that has caused you the most trouble and anxiety, that would have caused you to flee or to fight. The problem that has caused you the greatest harm or alarm. And now you can know that you're about to begin the demonstration that will correct it for all time. This condition will be healed. This problem will find its perfect solution. Begin to relax now and focus your attention at the top of the head. At the very top of the head, at the crown of the head. That part of you that represents your aura or your halo, where the body of light is around you. And silently say to yourself something like, the mind of God is quickened in me. Think it. Realize that you are aware that your mind is awakening. You're waking up. You're coming alive. You're a spiritual being, rejuvenated. Now focus the attention in the very center of the head, relaxing the mind, and stop the thinking process. Just let go and let God. And listen to what the presence of God is saying to you. You're not talking to God now, you're listening. Remember that your name is Simon, and that means hearer. Be still and you can hear it. The infinite presence of God is telling you that there is a perfect solution to your need. A perfect answer to your problem. All the power in the universe is ready to respond. The miracle even now is trying to happen to you. You hear this, but at first you don't believe it because you have believed in the problem too long to surrender it suddenly. But now you begin to believe it. You begin to believe this idea that the Christ of you is revealing, that the perfect solution is unfolding. A miracle is taking place in your mind and in your affairs. And silently say to yourself, I believe. I believe it. I have faith and confidence. And in this very moment, your name is changed. Your nature is changed. You see, you no longer believe in problems, but you believe in solutions, spiritual solutions, and the power to carry them out. In this state of consciousness, as you behold the possibility of your own good coming from God, the Christ says, thou art Peter. No longer Simon, but Peter. And upon this state of consciousness, I will build the new life. And now our attention goes to Andrew, Peter's brother, Power. And focus your attention at the small of the back in the area of the adrenals. Silently but very positively speak these words. Be still. Be still. You're speaking to your feeling nature, to your emotional nature, and you're telling it to be still, to release any negative activity that is there. To release the old ideas of failure and of strife and of hardship and of fear, anxiety, worry. To all negative emotions, you are saying, be still, be gone. And they leave. The old has passed away. Instantly, you can see how your negative emotions have robbed you in the past of your true nature, of your joy, of your hope, and consequently of your strength, and of your ability to do what you have needed to do. And now you can hear the voice within speaking again. For thus saith the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, in returning and rest shall you be saved. In quietness and confidence shall be your strength. In this quietness now in you, there is great confidence. The absolute certainty that your good is unfolding. Can you feel it? You're not thinking it, you're feeling it. And as you feel it, a color fills your mind. It's the color of spring green, the color of new growth. A new season is beginning to unfold in your life. that unfolding season that we call spring, and you can see the spring green that happens to be the color of strength and of Andrew. And for the first time, you understand strength. Strength is something that you feel. You can feel it. It's something that you are. Quietness, stillness, confidence, feeling good. Feeling good is strength. The better you feel, the more strength you have. Can you feel the expansion of strength in you and of your capacity to enjoy? Of course you can. Be still and know that I am God, in charge of your life. The Lord God himself is performing his own special miracles now. You can feel it. You believe it. Christ in you, your hope of glory, giving you the power to return to your world and live the life that your heart desires. Can you feel the excitement that is in you, the quiet, peaceful, joyous expectancy of good? This is your strength. And now suddenly you have the strength to be a doer, not a hearer only. You can know that you can and will achieve the goal and fulfill the tasks that have been assigned to you. Faith, the power to say yes to your good, and strength, the feeling that will believe that good through all eternity and will nurture that good, that feeling. The belief in the new life and the strength to achieve it, thinking and feeling in perfect harmony at last. And you prepare yourself now to go forth into your life this week, remembering to keep these powers awake, alert, alive, and enthusiastic, feeling good. An inner excitement, and yet the calm of the placid sea, where all negativity, the waves of negativity have become stilled, and the winds of negative thoughts have ceased. Only the good is there. You see it and you feel it. And all around you, this color green, spring unfolding, new life coming alive in you. And if in you, then certainly around you. Faith and strength, two of the mystical powers of your mind that in this very hour have changed you and changed your world. And oh God, we thank you that this miracle has happened, and we go forth to make our demonstration upon the earth. And so it is.
This concludes the lesson on side B of tape number 1. Now proceed to tape number 2 for the continuation of The Superpowers of the Mind.